Today on CityCast Chicago, should Riot Fest get a permit for Douglas Park? Parking meters continue to net record profits, and lead producer Simone Alisei and I are going through some very silly Chicago rankings. It's Wednesday, June 14th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Good morning, Simone. Welcome back to the mic, my friend.
Hey, Jacoby, how are you?
I am doing fine. We got some great things to talk about, but we're going to start with neighbors gathered in Douglas Park to protest Riot Fest yet again ahead of today's Park District meeting, considering whether or not to give a permit approval for the September Music Festival. We asked our CityCast listeners and Hey Chicago readers to weigh in on how they felt about Riot Fest coming back to Douglas Park. But before we jump into that, Simone, remind us, what's the conflict here over in North Lawndale?
Yeah, this has been ongoing pretty much since Riot Fest moved from Humboldt Park to Douglas Park. Many residents have been upset that the fest takes up their park for part of the summer. It's not just those few days in September when the fest is going, but also, there's tear down and there's setup, which means that people don't have access to the park. It also, it's a big music festival. There's a lot of people there, so it can be really loud.
So like 50,000 every single day?
Yeah. And so, up until recently, Riot Fest wasn't the only music festival taking place at Douglas Park. Riot Fest has been there for the past 7 years, but we'd also seen Heatwave, Lyrical Lemonade, also at Douglas Park. But those two fests ended up leaving this year in part due to complaints from residents. And right now, the only fest that's still there is Riot Fest, but neighbors are still upset and still, are trying to see if maybe they can get a permit denied for the music festival. And I would say that those opinions were reflected when we polled Hey Chicago readers last week.
Yeah, we have been following this since the start of CityCast Chicago. And about a month ago when Riot Fest announced their lineup, which features the Foo Fighters, the Postal Service, The Cure, a lot of residents were like, y'all don't even have a permit yet. Of course, Riot Fest came back and said, like many festivals of this size, many events of this size, they had gotten conditional approval from the Park District. But that final permit had yet to be established. And they say they've held more community meetings. They say they've listened to the public a little bit more. They say they've added, additional funding to clean up the park, that they'll move speakers away from the hospital, which is a huge concern for people in the neighborhood. But it just seems like a ton of residents near Douglas Park in the Lawndale neighborhood, really this is zero sum for them. We don't want concessions. We want you to pack up and to dip.
Yeah, that was pretty much, like I said, the conclusion that Hey Chicago readers came to as well. Anton A. told us Riot Fest has not been a good neighbor to the community. Their festival is a microcosm of the generational and systemic injustices and divestment in Lawndale. And I think that's another thing to keep in mind here, right, is the particular location of Douglas Park in the city. I think we have had conversations on the show about music fests in general. We're going to be talking more about music fests later this week in our summer entertainment guide. But we have talked about sort of the impact on downtown, for example, when Grant Park and Millennium Park are taken up. But those complications are compounded in some of these neighborhoods that are clamoring for business investment, for example, that are clamoring for more programming, maybe in those parks that are for those residents. For its part, Riot Fest has sort of tried to renew its efforts to bring local businesses into the fest, actually get, neighborhood vendors to be there during the festival. And they are sort of doubling down on that kind of outreach. But what you hear from neighbors is that it's not enough.
Especially for a community like Lawndale, the park serves even like more of a community need. And it's not to compare like a Douglas Park to a Grant Park, right? Local sports teams want to use both parks, right? Residents want to be able to walk through both parks. But, regardless of how you spin it, there are more options for residents who live downtown to involve themselves in other entertainment, to do other outdoor activities. When we start talking about Alondale, this is a huge gem to this community. This is their sort of outdoor respite in a way that it is, just lacking in the neighborhood.
Yeah, Gregory B. told us, he sort of describes that a private for-profit fest takes the park for half the summer, snarls traffic, makes getting in and out of the neighborhood extremely difficult, and is extremely loud and disrespectful. This event flat out sucks for the locals. But one thing I do think is really interesting, and something else that we had a reader tell us is, we also talk about over the course of Chicago summer, when we're talking about tourists and bringing people in and bringing new people to Chicago, wanting them to not just be downtown, right? We don't want all of this fun economic activity, these big events. If you concentrate them all downtown, there are people who live downtown and they've got to get to the grocery store and stuff too. But also B, it doesn't allow people to see all of Chicago. And that's something that Shelley H. told us. She said, I think it's important for people to see parts of Chicago that aren't downtown. I think bringing people into the neighborhoods helps them see Chicago is a vibrant, diverse, and safe city, which I think is a compelling argument. Maybe not necessarily for Riot Fest in particular, but certainly having some of these festivals outside of Northerly Island, outside of Grant Park, outside of Millennium Park to have something that will kind of attract folks to those neighborhoods, you hope.
I mean, one of the reasons and ways I'm able to experience so many different neighborhoods in Chicago, especially during the summer, is it is so easy to go look at our events calendar, see what little street festivals are taking place, whether it's West Fest over in Westtown, whether I'm in Roscoe Village getting Burger Fest, Jeff Fest all the way up in Jefferson Park. So I agree. And so we definitely want to be bringing people into Lawndale, coming into the community, experiencing Douglas Park. But like you said, using a private for-profit festival as the major sort of driving force to bring outside Chicagoans into a neighborhood, bringing tourists into a neighborhood, I just don't think it is as compelling for the people who live there. It's a great reason to visit the neighborhood, but it shouldn't come at the sacrifice of the people who call it home every single day.
The other thing I'll say, Jacoby, too, is I do think those neighborhood fests are great and it's great to put attention on them. But the fact of the matter is if I am, living really far away from Lawndale, either I'm in the suburbs or I'm way up on the north side or I'm coming in from out of town, the Foo Fighters are going to attract me more, right? When I hear that name,
facts.
Then whatever. Not to discount our local talent, which is awesome and so great. But the fact of the matter is, it's a more recognizable name that I can kind of latch onto. So I do think it's a tough debate. I think the park district's in a really tough situation, just given the amount of pressure that they are under. So it will be interesting to see how they vote later today.
Diablo 4 has arrived. As the forces of hell gather, only you can stand in their way. Journey across the expansive open world of Sanctuary. Choose from 5 powerful classes, then progress them to fit your playstyle. Adventure with your friends in up to 4-player co-op with cross-play and cross-progression on all platforms. Welcome to Hell. Diablo 4, available now. Rated M for mature. Tap the banner or visit this episode's page to learn more.
Another story we're watching this week is Chicago parking meters are back in the news because they continue to net record profits, right? Which might be good news for the overall economy. More people outside, more people downtown. But for Chicagoans, one, we aren't seeing those dollars directly, and it reminds us of what we believe is one of the worst deals made by a Chicago mayor in recent years. Simone, for people who might not be familiar, can you explain why the parking meter deal pisses Chicagoans off so much?
Right. So number one, people don't like paying for parking. So I think let's just get that out of the way right off the bat. But the real issue here is under former Mayor Richard M. Daley, he made a deal to privatize parking meters, some garages, and also the Skyway. And basically, it means that when you're paying that $5, $6, $7 to park, whatever it is, depending on where you are, those dollars aren't going directly to the city. It's not like you're paying the city to then reinvest in transportation infrastructure, for example. You're paying that money to private investors because they run the parking meters. The deal was sort of made as a sort of short-term solution to some budget problems we were having in the 2000s. Part of it influenced by, if you listened to our conversation earlier this week about pensions and Chicago's pension funds, Daley didn't want to raise property taxes, and this was a deal that sort of gave us some short-term cash on that, but it was passed very quickly. Alders were sort of taken by surprise. It was very kind of under the table. People didn't know what was going on. And now what has happened since is that private company, not only have they recouped their original investment, their entire $1.16 billion investment.
With a B, big B.
With a B, right? That's the original investment. They've gotten that back. Plus, they've made $530 million more since that deal went into effect. And that is money that is not coming to the city of Chicago.
Jeez. And y'all, this was a 75-year lease. When we start talking about selling off public goods, whether it's space for parking, whether we're talking about skyways, whether we're talking about water in the city, we're always looking at deals that are 50, 60, 75 years. It only took them 15 years with a global pandemic sprinkled on top for them to make back their entire billion-dollar purchase and make about half of that in revenue in that time. And again, this is one of those moments that consistently feels like it just smacks Chicagoans in the face, because this is money that's not going to the city. And let's connect it to other things. When you think about a street festival, when you think about a music festival, when those parking spots are taken up by a festival, by some 18-wheeler, the city still has to pay the company for that. It's not just that we're not seeing the money from these parking meters. It's also that our tax dollars still end up going back to this company by way of the city have to pay for taking up spots. So there's a clear reason why when Chicagoans look at one of the over 36,000 parking meter spaces in the city, they give that extra bit of frustration. It's not just that we don't want to pay the rates that have only gone up, right? You're looking at the average of about $2.50 per hour and $7 hourly downtown. It's not just that we don't want to pay that. It's that we know we were sort of sold down the river about 15 years ago.
And I think the other thing that's tough about this is, as you said, it's a 75-year lease. We still have 60 years left on that lease. And so far, other mayors have only kind of been able to make adjustments on the margin, but it will be interesting to see what, if anything, Mayor Brandon Johnson tries to do on this, because, as you said, it's sort of a universally despised policy in the city, but there's really only so much you can do once the deal is inked.
All right, before we wrap up this conversation, we have to talk about some of the funny emails we get here at CityCast, right? We get a lot of press releases with random rankings about Chicago. I can't say they're exactly reliable, but we wanted to share some recent ones that made us laugh or go, what the hell are you talking about? And I want to start with one that is, again, kind of connected to the conversation we've been having this week, but its own category, and that's cycling in the city, right? We talked about how to make biking and getting around the city safer for everyone involved. But Simone, a press release came out that says Chicago ranks in the top 10 for a particular type of cycling. What is that?
Yeah, so Chicago, according to lawn care company Lawn Starter, which does a variety of local city studies like this, Chicago is 7th in the country for naked bike riding.
I don't even know how you get data on that, my G. I don't even know how you find out about that.
So they looked at a bunch of different things. They looked at, for example, weather, and particularly weather during the summer. So there's sort of some of the cities that did really well have great weather all year round, but certainly not all of them. Number one was Philly, for example. Number two was Portland. So the other thing they kind of looked at was, do you have a big naked bike ride, some kind of big event? And are people searching for that event? And Chicago does. There's a World Naked Bike Ride happening in Chicago on June 24th. So it's coming up very soon. It's very big. You can find pictures around the internet on Facebook. And then they also looked up sort of nudist friendliness, talking about, public nudity laws and like how often are those laws enforced. Chicago and Illinois do have public indecency laws, but it's like highly discretionary as to whether those are enforced. And so for an event like the Naked Bike Parade, for example, if you're not being overtly sexual, if you are, not drinking and making a ruckus, like, probably no one's going to bat an eye at you, and you can, go out biking with nudity. They also looked at like bike safety and bike infrastructure in general. And Chicago is often voted fairly highly on that front. We do, we're flat, so it's easy to bike. We do have at least some network of bike lanes and biking paths that make biking really attractive in the city. And as we've said, during the summer, lots of people are out on bikes. So, we've got high biking, we've got great summer weather most of the time. And our public indecency laws, aren't as strict, aren't as enforced as maybe they are in some other places.
I mean, you made a really good argument for why Chicago is a great place for naked. Just to be real, you're not going to catch me out there. And it has nothing to do with some sort of sensitivity to nudity. It just seems like biking is already in some ways uncomfortable on certain parts of the body. And so just directly exposing your ass to a bike seat just seems like you asking for trouble, no matter how much like padding you have on that thing. That just feels like the pressure is just like smacking you on the butt. And then, I'm already sweating from my head. To think that just my entire body is just like leaving sweat all on my bike as I ride. That doesn't seem appealing to me at all. And let's get past it. What if you hit that ground? What if you fall off that bike? Like, come on, like already the shirt and the shorts or the shirts and the joggers aren't doing a lot. Everybody still wear your helmet, but like if your bare body hits that rough concrete, I'm like, do I help you up? Do I? How do
you gotta help him up, Jacoby?
Of course, I'm gonna help you up, but I'm like, it just seems like it's creating way more cons than pros in this moment to be out here, just letting it fly for the bike. But hey, Chicago apparently ranked 7th. But if you want to go on a bike ride, if you want to come out on a bike ride, even with me, we ain't gonna be naked, but there is a nice bike event coming up, the Juneteenth Black Joyride, starting at Grant Park at 11 o'clock on Monday, June 19th. And we're riding all the way till DuSable, fully clothed, helmets, wear your elbow, your knee pads if you need them. But I will see you then, fully clothed, my friends. We'll drop a link in the show notes for you as well. So, what are some other press releases that we have gotten recently?
One that caught my eye because I wasn't sure I agreed with it. We got in our inbox saying that Illinois is the 10th most romantic state in the country. Most romantic. This is from a jewelry company. And what they did is they analyzed Google search data over the last year, looking for a bunch of different terms and how frequently they were searched. And some of those terms include engagement rings, romantic getaways, florists, romantic restaurants, and Illinois ranked really highly on all those searches.
My first question is, who is above us? So I went and looked up a list. I'm not sure if it's the same list, but on the one I found, we were ranked 7th. Number 1 was West Virginia, my dog.
Number 1 on this other list was New Jersey. So
Right, New Jersey is number 2 on this list.
Yeah, I'm skeptical.
And again, I mean, I don't know if we got any West Virginia listeners, any New Jersey listeners, but honestly, I can't understand possibly why West Virginia. I'm not sure what's going on in Pennsylvania that makes them they're aggressive.
It's the city. I don't know. Philly's the city of brotherly love. Like,
no,
I don't know.
New York. All right. I'm sure, I bet Skinny Atlas is gorgeous.
I mean, literally every romantic comedy is is set in New York. So I get New York. That's fine.
Yeah, but the state. But if you get to upstate New York, right, you get out to your skinny Atlas, they got some nice things there. But I will say, I'm not shocked that Illinois ranks in, the top 20% of America. Because even as we've done more coverage and I've gotten out of my Chicago bubble, because I already think Chicago is hella romantic. But when I think about Illinois, right, when you think about the biodiversity, right, we got some tucked out waterfalls. We have some really cool road trip opportunities around the state. And so I can understand, where people can find the romance in Illinois and Chicago. But I got a huge problem with some of these states that are ahead of us. I've been to West Virginia before. I've been there. It's nothing at all. Should have got elevation.
Jacoby, though, here's what I want to ask you is, do you think these search terms that are mentioned, engagement rings, romantic getaways, florists, romantic restaurants, do you think they're a good indicator of how romantic a place is?
I don't think engagement rings counts. I don't.
Yeah, I agree.
That's like basing, how much can people in a particular state afford homes based on the houses they looking up on Zillow. I look up houses on Zillow I can't afford all the time. That data is not helpful. And so but getaways,
yeah,
restaurants and floors, I'd say yes, only because as somebody who tries to plan all three of these things, they do just take a extra step of effort. And I think one of the things that makes something romantic is the thought and the effort put into it. And so if you're trying to figure out where to get good flowers from, if you're trying to figure out the best getaways, the best trips to take someone on, what does my city think are romantic restaurants? I do think you're at least trying. And I know some people who they won't even do a Google search to try and give their significant other a new experience. And so I will take something from those last three search terms, but engagement rings, nah. Simone, this was a fantastic conversation. Love talking to you every single week.
Thanks, Jacoby.
Before I let you go, one quick reminder, head over to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago, at chicago.citycast.fm to subscribe. You don't need me to tell you, but I'm going to tell you anyway. It's the best damn newsletter in Chicago. We'll be back here tomorrow bright and early with the best damn podcast in the city. I'll talk to you then. Peace. Energy!